met up with my old friend John Robb over the weekend. He was in London talking about his life and career. And for those that don't know John, he formed the Membranes in the early 1980s, and he's an author who's writing about music and the future. I really admire. And his talk this weekend was called "Do You Believe in the Power of Rock and Roll?" So, do I? Well, in a big sense, yes. I mean, music, art, poetry, and dance remain really I think, the number one sort of threats to the establishment and the elite. But sadly, in my opinion, the music establishment is just as big a threat to music and artists as the other establishment. And I'm not entirely talking about the entirely fucked capitalist model, although. Well, actually, when I heard that UMG are proposing to make a performance-related payout to their CEO of 119 million pounds, I'll take that back. I will. I think we should talk about it. But capitalism for me is at the very core of everything that's really become evil in this world. And but I'm also talking more overtly, I guess, about some of the less talked about things like genres. And I know that genre is something that I do talk about a lot, but putting a band in a genre has really been, it's kind of been happening forever, and we could talk a lot about, the really sort of malignant effects of using genre as a way to compartmentalize playlists, market bid label artists, that sort of stuff. But with categorization also comes all sorts of, sort of social constructs, and sometimes the subtle ones are the most harmful ones. Those that are essentially used as an anti-freedom power tool to keep people in their lanes. I'm thinking of ways to dress, subjects to speak about, instruments to play, even, and probably the worst of all, who they deem allowable to actually play the music. I mean, for example, whatever you think musically of Beyonce's album Cowboy Carter, it seems clear to me that the gatekeeping that back in the day excluded black musicians from a genre that they essentially created still exists. And there isn't anything too subtle about that. It's really, kind of rooted in racism. I don't really remember Kid Rock for being subjected to any such gatekeeping when he went country. Anyway, enough of my ranting. I said I won't get into ranting.
It's such a good intro. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble staying quiet over here because these topics are so up my alley and what I think about and rage about all the time. So
Oh,
sorry, you go
brilliant!
on, finish your
No,
intro.
no.
I love
Well,
it.
I was going to introduce Lizzie, but there we go. So Lizzie's here. So a little bit about my guest today. She's written, sung, played on, and produced three really world class records. Her latest being
Thank
Halfsies,
you.
which really sort of fucks off those genres and is just a really fabulous piece of work. So I'm really excited and honoured
Thank
to
you.
have Lizzie No with me. So Lizzie and Berlin, welcome to the show. Great to see you.
Thank you so much for having us. Berlin,
Not
do
at
you have
all.
anything to say about capitalism? He doesn't approve of it. That's
He
the look
doesn't
that he
approve.
has.
I can.
No.
That's the look I can tell. I can tell with his
Yeah,
eyes. He's like,
he's
oh
for
no,
freedom.
no, no. So I was reading out. I mean, if we just for a moment to not to get the music stuff out of the way, but to sort of talk a bit about Halvesies, because obviously that was released
Hmm.
at the beginning of this year, and I read some, and it is related to some of the stuff in the intro. But I read a review, and there was a sort of comment that from the reviewer that Halvesies appears to be stylistically fractured
Hmm.
on first listen. And I think, I mean, I kind of hear that, but I think that is some of the sort of the conditioning that we've had over God knows how long, but again by the industry, that music should be constrained, kind of in its style, and also it kind of like helps companies, the labels to sort of shift more records, doesn't it?
Right. I think that those, there are times where I was working on the record and wondered, do all of these songs fit stylistically?
Mm,
Like to me, they I chose the songs for this record based on the story and
yeah.
also generally the sound. I don't know. I
Mm,
think sonically they work together, but yeah,
yeah.
I even stopped myself at moments and thought are is there enough of a through line connecting these
Mm,
songs?
mm,
Um, I feel like anything that is written by me and sung by me is going to have enough, like, in common sonically to hang together as an album.
mm,
Um, but it is tricky when you start to make the transition from I'm making a work of art that means something to me personally, um, to I need to sell this product.
mm,
And it really is in the selling that things start
mm.
to get sticky because
It
fans
does.
don't really care. Like when
Yeah.
people are listening to an album, they don't really mind if there's a lot of sonic variation. It's
Mm.
just in a matter of what sticker are you going to put it on at
But
Target, you know?
yeah, exactly, exactly. This is the problem, and I guess sort of selling is. I mean, it's a kind of it's a sort of fact of life, isn't it? It's something
Hmm.
that we kind of need to do. But if you, I always think when you kind of bury down the the fact that it's so shit. The fact that you have to earn money from it has a it just sort of it gives it a there's a distortion, isn't there?
Hmm.
You have to kind of create that sort of theme, but I guess you have to create that theme anyway for people to even to listen to it.
Yeah, I'm much more comfortable talking about like the story elements
Mm,
and what interests me musically, like,
mm,
oh, here was a string arrangement that my co-producer wrote that I was really interested in. I dug really deep into the vocal arrangements, this or that. Like
yeah,
what genre it's in, it feels like so kindergarten
it does, doesn't it?
compared to the ideas that I want to talk about when it comes to my music. And also like I don't think I'm alone in this. Like
Mm,
I don't know any musician that I find interesting who is, like, willing to be hemmed in by genre.
totally.
Like, if you're a good musician, you like all kinds of music and you listen to all kinds of music.
Yeah,
I'm very weirded out by anyone that's like, "Yeah, I'm just straight down the line this genre." Like, those people I'm always like, "Are you sure you're really, like, a
yeah.
creative artist?"
I mean, especially
You know?
especially yeah, especially today when there's so much more music that's readily available. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to be kind of like nostalgic about my childhood or anything, but what, when I was growing up, it was it was the availability, is only really on the radio where you would
Mhm.
sort of hear things or word of mouth and stuff like that. So there was a lot of risk. So if I think about myself, when I was younger, I was much more narrow-minded, much
Mhm.
more. And it was really when music just became more, I guess, more accessible, and probably I started to grow up as well, and sort of.
Right, and I also think that there was a utility to genres as far as they related to, um, fan, uh, generated scenes.
Mm,
Like, I think there is something really useful about a group like, an actual community saying, "This is what we call ourselves. We're
mm,
calling ourselves punk. We're calling ourselves, you know, Americana," or whatever.
yeah,
There are genres that still have that feeling of, like, this came from the people and we're choosing to self-define this way. I think once a good amount of money gets involved and you're seeing it on the Billboard charts,
yeah.
that's when we need to be skeptical.
Yeah. What's your opinion on, kind of like, say, I mean, if you I mean, any of the, either of those sort of genres that you mentioned, let's take
Yeah.
kind of take the punk one, for example. There's always been, I guess, a sort of uniform, um,
Mhm.
and identity that is associated with that sort of
Yeah.
genre. I mean, I think it's perhaps not as cliched as it was, but it's still there
Right.
for sure. I mean, how do you sort of see that, and that again, that sort of that kind of identity thing being a restraint?
I think it's double-edged because there are things that are really good about self-identifying with a community,
Mm,
especially when the community is explicitly in opposition to the mainstream.
yeah.
Um, Like,
yeah,
I think about that with folk music a lot. I do a podcast called Basic Folk, and sometimes,
yeah,
people will like to joke like, "Oh, you're so anti-genre, but you do this podcast called Basic Folk." I feel like the folk identity is useful because there's an understanding that we aren't about the bells and whistles
mm,
of the mainstream. We're not about making money, just piles and piles of money. We're not about fitting in and making everything sound slick and uniform. Like there are like there are values that come
mm,
along with it. Being anti-capitalist, being pro-worker,
yeah, yeah,
being collaborative, being, singing in harmony together, right? I could go on and on about the specifics in folk. And I think
mm,
punk and other genres like it have similar like standards where, if you're going to be one of us, you're expected to behave a certain way.
yeah,
Um, in punk music, we're not about bullies. We're not about,
yeah,
you know, the perfectionism of other genres that gets in the way of authenticity. Like
yeah,
when self-defining within a genre lets you hold yourself to a high standard of behavior and artistic work, I think it's a good
mm,
thing.
yeah. I remember
Yeah.
that I did, I don't know if you remember there was a band that I really got into. Now obviously it was the 1980s. It was about
Mhm.
86, I think, when they brought their first record out, and it was actually a response to the Live Aid sort
Mhm.
of concerts that were done, and the band is Chumbawamba, and
Yes.
so and that first record that they brought out, Pictures of Starving Children Sell
Mhm.
Records, that has stayed with me through my life. And I was so happy when I did a an interview for a magazine with Alice Nutter, who was
Mhm.
one of the founding members.
Oh, you're
And
kidding.
oh, no, no, she's amazing. She's like she's a screenwriter now. She does, sort of
Mhm.
TV script writing, and she lives up in the UK near Leeds, just outside Leeds, which is pretty
Oh,
much
nice.
where she grew up. And,
Leeds is a cool city.
yeah, it is, yeah. Yeah, it's always been very sort of creative, but back then, they lived in a, basically in a squat. They held very kind of sort of firm, I guess, the views around community. I mean, they were lumped in as sort of anarchists, but they
Mhm.
which, I guess in a way they were, but they were really about community. I remember Alice like saying that her the 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 feeling of being part of that, she called a gang,
Mhm.
who lived together. They shared all their money. There was, it was really kind of equal. Was just so powerful, powerful, a
Mhm.
kind of glue of sort of bringing people together who kind of bound by by similar values, and what they wanted to achieve. But it was interesting how then that changed as they sort of got older. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think those types of communities are, like, absolutely essential to a lot of the art that
mm,
goes on to become, like, essentially part of the mainstream. Because,
yeah,
like, we can't afford to make this art on
yeah,
our own. Um, if you wanna get anything done in a musical community, like, you have to share the
yeah,
wealth in common. You have to
yeah,
share resources because, I mean, unless you, like, just come in to the industry with wealthy parents and a ton of connections, I guess it's, like, nice for some. The rest of
yeah,
us, like, need a lot of help, and,
yeah,
like, I might not have money to pay you for your services, but I can help out by
mm,
selling merch at your show or donating vocals or donating my time. And so I
mm,
think like by necessity we end up creating um these communities that are based on reciprocity and care,
mm,
and being invested in one another's long-term well-being rather
mm.
than the short-term uh exchanging of money.
Yeah, I really like that idea, and I
Hmm.
sort of followed this institute in called Institute for the Future, because I'm sort of
Mm,
in this sort of future thinking and what have you. And one of the I think she's like the I don't know. She's one of the leaders at that institute, Marina Gorbis, and she's written about this thing called she called it social structing, which is basically what you were
Mhm.
saying, about how instead of thinking about a world without money, that
Mhm.
that basically I'm thinking about what I'm interested in, like the skills and attributes that we have about how you know you you're you've got a talent and training in plumbing, for example.
Right.
I'm an electrician. We both need each other at certain sort of times. So it's that kind of like exchange of
Mhm.
skills, which those skills are kind of assets that we have. It's not just money that's an asset. It's other things as well.
Oh, yeah. I feel like as a musician, like, the deeper I've gone into making this my career, the more I'm already living in a world. It's not exactly a world without money, I wanna get farther down that road,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
but, like, I've learned the value of, like, if having a friend come along on tour as emotional support,
yeah,
like, that emotional labor is a huge part of our work. That, like, if I can pass on an opportunity to a friend, that can be worth, you
yeah.
know like, we figure out intuitively, like, what do we have to offer and what do we need, and being, like, unashamed to ask for that help. I think that becomes so essential in music because none of us are making any money. Like, the
Very
fact that
true.
the music industry has been such a strange test case for the worst, like, parts of late capitalism, like,
Yeah,
streaming has taken away so much of what should have been our income. Guarantees for live performance haven't gone up in a decade,
mm,
despite inflation and the cost of living going up. So we are already living in this world where the connection between working hard and being compensated has been severed. Um,
mm,
and the value of our work um, has had to be redefined over and over and over. So I
mm,
think that people that work in music are already pretty savvy about bartering, um, trusting in one another as like professionals and
yeah,
as friends. Like, I'm going to invest in you now with my time and my work, knowing that I'm not getting paid my full rate or whatever. And like, we're going to trust one another to,
yeah.
pay it back and pay it forward.
I love that. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's almost like the kind of like a fundamental. I guess if you think back to when you were a kid, like at the taking your sort of very
Mhm.
first steps, and um when you start hanging out with other kid, at that I don't know 1 2 year old,
Yeah.
you have no none of the kind of social conditioning that then happens, and there
Hmm.
is that trust, isn't there?
Yep.
In the kids that you're playing with, which is very very pure.
Yeah. It's interesting, like, when I talk to people that are in other that don't work in music, sometimes, like, I'll say offhand about how much of my job I have to do
Mm,
on pretty much unpaid or, working at a loss, and that's shocking to people, that
yeah,
you can do a whole festival and literally not get paid, and you're paying out of your own pocket for hotels and travel and all that, paying the band salaries. Um, but then on the other side of the coin, there is a generosity amongst people in music and like a willingness to invest in one another
mm,
that is unique, I think. Like,
yeah,
my friends show up for me in ways like I that are like frankly unprofessional, you know? Like, people we really stick our necks out for one another, and I think that's what
yeah,
makes the music community like really special. And like that's what makes it even possible to continue
yeah. No, so
given
that's a
everything
really
that we're up against.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really good point, and I think that is something that certainly in any kind of business corporate world, whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
has been lost. I mean,
Mhm.
there's so little trust, the
Yes.
and even amongst colleagues,
Mhm.
where you get where you get a team that sort of really works together. I mean, that's kind of like applauded because it's so rare. It's just
Right.
it's just sort of bizarre. It's almost like that, being in a corporate, it changes people's being
Mhm.
in
And
a
it
way.
changes how you relate to people and
Yeah,
how you calculate what's worth your time and how to
Yeah,
treat people. Yeah, that's a really
yeah,
good way of putting it. The trust thing is something that's so essential,
yeah.
like in my industry.
I mean, going back to when you were a kid, when you were growing up,
Mhm.
you know, however far you want to go back. I mean, what would you remember as your sort of formative influences? I'm thinking that, you know, in anything, you know, whether it's sort of musically or just, you know, in your life, as to the things that have sort of shaped you, who you are now, and probably will sort of stay with you.
Um, that's such a good question. Um, the I don't know why this is coming to mind, but this is a memory that I don't really I have, like, vague memories of, but my parents remember that in kindergarten, when you're in elementary school, you learn a lot of history through song, or maybe
Mm,
that was just this sort of Sacred Heart Catholic way of, like, teaching history through music. I learned a lot of American history through little, like, songs and jingles,
mm,
and we learned about the Underground Railroad in kindergarten, which I think
mm.
was maybe developmentally a little bit too premature to teach
Yeah,
children about slavery at that time. But anyways,
yeah.
um, my mom said that like when I was 5 years old, like we were at a family party and there was like an uncle that was maybe like not like as who like wasn't hanging out with everyone. And I went over to him and like took his hand and started singing Follow the Drinking Gourd,
Mm,
like the whole song about how like you can use the stars to get yourself to freedom.
yeah.
And I've been chasing that.
Mm.
Like, that is a song like that that
Fascinating.
has practical utility and is a map that leads people to freedom.
Mm,
That like, the early songs that I knew were that.
mm.
I listened to, like, Aretha Franklin and Peter, Paul and Mary, and, like, you know, the great songwriters, right?
Yeah,
Great
yeah.
songwriters have ways of making stories really direct and
Mm,
creating art that, in a very practical sense, leads you to freedom, leads
mm,
you to an understanding of love, like,
mm.
these basic things that we need as human beings to
Yeah.
survive.
Interesting, 'cause I mean, if I think for, you know, back to I mean, I've been doing a bit of this over the past sort of few years. And
Mhm,
I think some of it in a way was both my parents died a couple of years ago, and I think
mhm.
they've been ill before. Well, my
I'm
mum
so
had been
sorry
ill
to hear
before
that.
then. No, that's okay. Thank you. Um, and I think it was, you know, my thinking into my past, my childhood sort of was
Mhm,
probably initiated by this, you know, by what was
mhm.
happening to them. And I'm an only child, right? So, and it's interesting when you just said, I don't know why I'm thinking of this, and it's like almost that stream of consciousness. It's what sort of comes out. So the first
Yep.
thing that I remember that really sort of stuck with me was when I think I must have been about 8 years old, and I've been out playing with my friends in the backfield, and then
Mhm.
I needed to go in. It was my ball, and I wanted to take the ball in, blah blah blah. And then one of my friends. So the next thing that I know, but even before I got in the house, my friends had gone, and then my dad called me upstairs, and basically my friend had told his mum, who'd gone and told my dad that I told him to fuck off,
No.
which I hadn't, you know, I really
I'm
hadn't.
shocked. No, you can admit it.
You know,
You won't
I
get
s
in trouble,
I
you can admit
it
it.
is Berlin listening?
Berlin is
Companies is a
passed out. Can you
he's
tell? Can you hear him
he's
snoring?
I can't hear him snoring, but he looks fairly sleepy, let's say.
Yeah.
No, but
I don't think he's
it was it and so anyway, the upshot is that basically my dad didn't believe me.
ugh.
You know, so yeah. So
I
this is sort
remember
of
those experiences as a kid
yeah,
when you actually didn't do anything wrong, but you got in trouble is like
yeah.
the rage, the
And I think that
indignation.
I think because I was an only child, and I always sort of felt that the spotlight was on me, that
Mhm,
it sort of hit quite hard, and obviously it did because it stayed with me for God knows how many years,
mhm.
for, you know, sort of 40 odd years. So but it's just interesting how those sort of things happen, and they then the knock on effect that that has on, you know, for me, it's been, you know, in trust. It's had an
Mm,
impact on my outlook on trust in some ways, and I have these sort of paradoxes in how I approach the different parts of trust. Yeah, anyway, I just think
dang.
I just think those kind of formative influences are just so important on how we this which is why I love the idea of emotional intelligence and teaching that
Mhm.
to kids from such an early age.
It's a hugely important skill. It's at the root of everything.
Mm,
Isn't it? Like being able to read a room. I mean, it's at the core of what I do
yeah,
because, it's a creative job, but you're also just reading a room every night. Like
yeah,
your whole job is to like connect with strangers.
yeah.
Um, it can be a really difficult puzzle.
It is, isn't it? I think it is. I think it's a very, very tricky one, especially, yeah, where you've got, you're playing in front of a room full of people,
Mhm.
will be very different personalities, very different things that are
Yeah.
influencing them, and you have to find that way of kind of connecting. So, things like, kind of empathy.
Mhm.
And also, I guess when and I don't know how you work when you're in the studio as well with
Mhm.
any other sort of musicians that come in, if you bring in
Mhm.
different producers to work with you,
Mhm.
you can see it
It's a
becomes really,
puzzle.
yeah,
It's tricky too. I think producing is really interesting, and, yeah, I've always worked with, a co-producer on each of my records,
yeah,
um, and everyone has a different style. I think that you spend some time, like, not only trying to read the minds of the players, but, like, trying to fit in like where a real human person that's in front of you that comes with their own whole library of influences and ideas, where that person fits into like an idealized version of a song that you've made up in your mind that no one else has ever heard. Like
yeah,
it is like a bizarre kind of mind reading, like
mm,
multi-directional mind reading. um, and then at the end you come up with something that isn't exactly any one of those, you know? It
yeah,
isn't
yeah,
exactly what the person would have played on their own. It isn't exactly what you would have imagined. It's like a third, usually better thing,
mm,
um, that happens when you, like, actually let spontaneity happen
mm,
within reason.
within reason, yeah.
Yes.
Actually, that's a good word, actually, spontaneity. I mean, how big a part is spontaneity in what you do? For example, in music, in how you
Mhm.
live your life?
I'm trying to I think it's everything, and that's difficult for me to accept as somebody who likes to have a plan. Um,
Mm, okay.
but I've had to learn it the hard way that, like, the things that you plan meticulously often are not going to be the
Mm,
things that make the most impact in your life. And like, I think you can also build in room for spontaneity by being more prepared, which is counterintuitive. Like when it comes
yeah.
to my live shows, the more I've drilled and repeated and performed the songs over and over and over, the more fun and spontaneity I have.
Mm,
Um, because when I'm not thinking about the form of the
mm,
song or the chord changes or the moves, and I'm not actually looking at my hands and I'm looking out or I'm looking up at, the great black mystery above,
yeah,
that's when you really start to play, actually. Like the word play is really a tricky one for me because that has never felt like what I do.
yeah.
Like people the main verb when it comes to music is play music, but I've always felt like I was like working or
Mm,
performing or practicing or attempting to perfect. Um, I
that's a good
actually a
point.
couple of years ago, like I have so many photos of when I was like a little kid playing violin, at the age of like 4, 5, 6,
Mm,
and I asked my mom if like all the times that she saw me play in these recitals, like, was I having did I have fun? Did I look like I was having fun? And she was like, what she said was, I was never you never really looked like you were having fun, but you looked like you knew what you were doing.
mm,
And like since I was a kid, I always thought of music as something that you worked at. which
Yeah.
is true, but it's taken me quite a while to access the part of it that's fun.
So, were you were you classically trained?
Mhm.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Because I
Yeah,
was as well. I mean,
that'll take some of the fun out of it as well.
oh, tell me about it. I mean, I played the cello, so that
Oh
was
my
my instrument
goodness.
when I was a
Yes,
kid. And yeah, I
that's for
mean,
serious.
I always remember, yeah, one at a recital or a concert that I was playing. I was in like the sort of orchestra and playing it,
Mhm.
and I remember like my dad said, or both my mum and dad actually saying, "You look like you were so miserable there," and I
Yeah,
was like, "Did I?" I'm not sure. I
yeah.
mean, I didn't enjoy. I mean, my kind of relationship with how I got into it and all that was a little bit strained. I mean, I did
Mhm.
really well at it, but I didn't enjoy it. I did.
Right. I don't think that I did either.
Yeah.
I had to break my relationship with music, like, in my 20s. I'm still breaking it,
Wow. Right.
um, because the idea of forcing something through when it's not feeling
Yeah.
natural, doesn't work in music,
Mm,
and I do think that there is a lot of, like, helpful wisdom that has to do with just putting in the hours and practicing even when you don't feel inspired.
yeah.
Um, that can be a really helpful building block, but I think if you're somebody that's competitive and somebody who's afraid of the unknown, um, you can get into a place where you'll spend years kind of banging your head against the wall just in a rut playing, like, just practicing over and over and over and not giving yourself like, taking a breath, to correct course and find
Yeah.
spontaneity and inspiration. Like,
Yeah.
inspiration still matters. You still like, it's still it's still music.
Yeah.
Um, it's still not like it's not bricklaying, and that can be tough to accept sometimes. Does that make sense? Like, sometimes
It
I want
no,
it
it
to be
does.
so simple. I want it to just be simple hard work.
Yeah.
Um, but unfortunately, you do have to, like, get to a place where you can feel the joy. Otherwise, you're not really making music.
I think that was that you've hit the nail on the head for me. That was my sort of issue with it, that
Mhm,
I felt like it wasn't my choice
mhm.
in lots of ways, and that sort of took the enjoyment. And also knowing the I think thinking about the sort of person that I am, when I knew the rules, I then found it hard to break outside of
Yep.
that sort of framework. So to bring that, I don't know, that yeah, that spontaneity, that kind of gut instinct to
Mhm.
do different things just wasn't. I felt uncomfortable at it. I think.
I think all of these topics that we're talking about are linked because having a comfort with sort of randomness and makes you a better
Mm,
musician and I think makes you more adaptable to the world that we're living in now. Like I have found like I used to find immense comfort in following every rule to the letter.
mm,
Um, I've always been very good at standardized tests.
mm.
Like what a nerdy skill to have, but and it makes you successful in a certain type of way.
I agree.
But I also think like it made me not it made it hard for me to become a great musician.
Yeah.
Like um because I could practice and practice and I could nail something. But like, was I really present in the work when I was
Mm,
just following, a series of rules I had made up in my mind, Like,
yeah.
no, not really. And I think we're like in a stage with our economy and with climate change and I think especially in the States, we are seeing our um, democratic principles exposed
Mm,
as extremely flawed and limited, like in real time. We are seeing our institutions kind of crumbling before
mm,
our eyes. And I think if you're really attached to this idea that if you do all the right things and you follow the rules, you'll be successful, this is a really destabilizing and frightening time.
I
Um,
agree.
and it like it helps if you've already had parts of your life where you've had to confront the reality that sometimes the rules don't make sense. Sometimes the rules are incorrect.
Mm,
Sometimes you have to like get in touch with your own intuition and do what you think is right.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to, like, just be present with another person and let them influence you and let their experience teach you something. Like, there's so many different ways of, like, getting a song made, and that
Yeah.
has helped me cope with some of the, like, societal collapse that I'm seeing.
Yeah. No,
And
I
I
hear
think that
you.
that's true for a lot of people, like, creative people are a little bit more accustomed to the things that are supposed to work don't really work. Okay, what do we do next?
You mentioned about liking a plan and being able to sort of plan
Mm,
ahead.
mhm.
Um, Now what was I gonna what was I gonna ask you? Oh, yes. With that, I mean, how do you then use that, with, how does that sort of desire sort of interact with, using your instinct, like your gut instinct?
You know what? It's a delicate balance. It's
Mm,
a really delicate balance. I use like, my instinct is, like, the most powerful tool when it comes to, like, goal setting. Um, because, you know, in, like, a musical career and also, like I've mentioned, like, in the world we're living in today, the things that our parents told us would lead to stability and success and well-being aren't necessarily, for sure anymore.
yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, work this many years, you'll probably be able to afford your own home, right? Like, that
Yeah.
is just out the
Agreed.
window.
Yeah.
And it's very uncertain what it's going to take to get what it is that you want, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I've, like I've really spent a lot of time, like, when I go running,
Mm,
I let my mind wander, and that's when I am able to identify my goals. Like, if there's
mm,
something that comes to me in my mind while I'm running, that's probably something that I want at
yeah.
on a deep level. I'll imagine traveling, how I want spending time with my friends, like, I'll envision myself with my friends sitting around a dinner table in 20 years. Like, okay,
Yeah.
that's when I envision what I want my life to be like in broad strokes. Oh,
Mm,
I wanna do, a tour at this level, I wanna have this many records. Like, these are, like,
yeah.
my big goals.
Yeah.
Um, and then I can trust myself to, like, work like a dog until I get there.
Mm, yeah.
I don't usually need a lot of help getting motivated to work hard
Yeah.
and to take next steps. What I need most is room to, like, dream and
Mm,
let my intuition,
mm,
guide me.
mm,
The other thing about intuition is it lets you know when goals need to be your goals and also the strategies that you're using to get there need to be readjusted.
yeah.
Because you can have like, sometimes I'll think like, "Oh, this collaboration is gonna be the thing that gets me to the next level," or,
Mm,
um, "This is the tour that's really gonna, like that I really need to, like, sell tons of merch to, like, make save money for X," right? Like, there's any number of little goals you might have along the way.
yeah.
But if you get into the situation and something's not right in your spirit, you need to reevaluate what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because on paper, it might look like, "Well, this is the thing that is supposed to be success for me."
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you're in the moment and you feel uncomfortable and you're feeling emotionally itchy, you probably there's gonna be a limited like, that's only gonna work for so long.
Yeah.
You can't contradict your own instincts endlessly before things start to really break in you. I don't know if that's, like, too abstract, but, like, I've been in
No.
situations where I'm like, "Oh, I need to get this record done by this time." Like, I just,
Yeah.
like, need to, like, push through, get it done really fast. But then, like, in the sessions, if I'm not feeling good, that
Mm,
means something's going on that I need to pay attention to. And, like, yeah, maybe it's gonna cost more money, maybe it's gonna take more time, but I need to listen to my intuition,
mm,
um, and, like, allow what I'm feeling spiritually affect what's happening on a business level,
yeah.
as scary as that is.
No, I agree. It does make sense completely. I think that, I mean, that instinct is such an abstract
Mhm.
thing, it's very hard to we kind of like to, I think as sort of humans in lots of ways, we like to sort of quantify things and,
Mhm.
put whether it's put a number on it or put a, some sort of measurement around it. But
Yeah,
instinct is so abstract. It's almost like, what is it? And it's this sort of feeling that, yeah, it's this sort of feeling that kind of appears. And
yeah.
um I mean,
I feel like
I've
if
learnt
we had
to,
had I would have had a totally different reaction to this conversation, like, a few years ago. I would have thought it was very woo-woo, and I think
mm,
that that's because instinct and intuition are things that you need to hone over time. Like,
yeah,
your intuition is always there, but if you've gotten accustomed to, drowning it out, or you've
mm,
gotten accustomed to hearing it and acting in opposition to it, basically, like, if you've gotten comfortable betraying yourself,
mm,
it's gonna take time to feel good trusting yourself, and it's going to take time before you are able to speak the same language as your intuition and understand what it's trying to say to you. And I think
yeah,
we live in a society that tells us that, like, is really good at training us away from our intuition.
I
Um,
agree.
and, like, I can speak especially, like, as my in my experience as a woman in a very male-dominated culture and
Yeah,
professional field, um, being in solidarity with yourself goes against my social conditioning.
yeah,
Um, there are countless big, small, and almost imperceptible moments where, as a woman, all of culture is telling me, "You can't trust yourself, you can't listen to yourself. Until a man agrees with you, you're probably just making it up."
yeah,
Um, in the studio, there are a lot of social codes that
yeah,
trend towards shut up and don't make a big fuss about it, all the way up to, at the Supreme Court, women not being
yeah,
believed. So, like, it takes practice to ask myself, what do I think? What do I feel? What do I want? What do
mm,
I think is correct? And then actually acting on that. Um, and that's something that I've had to develop over the course of many years and a lot of therapy and a lot of mistakes, right? So, like,
yeah.
I think this is what my intuition's telling me. I'm going to trust myself enough to go with it.
And I think that, intuition is usually right. I mean, I have
Hmm.
this
Yeah.
kind of weird thing where I I've got better at this, but I used to sort of, kind of like analyze things and try and kind of
Hmm.
like work them out. But then I had
Yep.
this other thing where my instinct would want to be kind of in charge, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'd have this kind of like bit of tension between the two. And sometimes that would cause me to be sort of paralyzed with,
Yes.
it's just like, "Fuck, just come on." You know? It was so frustrating. I've got better at that and to use my instinct more, I think, now than I perhaps used to.
It's
Um,
inconvenient, right? Because sometimes your instinct will be saying something really strongly and loudly, and you need to act on it, but your conscious mind doesn't yet have the words to explain. And it can
yeah.
put you in conflict with other people. It can put you in conflict with your own plans.
Mm.
But I agree with you that it's always pretty much always the best decision to go with what your gut is telling you.
With the you mentioned the kind of obstacles you face.
Mhm.
I mean, what does that take you to both navigate those and
Mhm.
and almost like the sort of resilience to keep your self motivation
This is
up?
a poignant question today because, you know, it's hard work. And, like, I
Mm,
think about quitting, not just music, but, like, the path of some resistance, fairly often.
mm,
Honestly, the number one tactical advantage that I have is that I have, like, real, real transparency in my friendships,
yeah,
um, especially with other women artists,
yeah,
um, where we can talk about everything from money, pay equity, craft stuff.
yeah,
When we're digging through, like, I don't really like how my voice is sounding these days. Like, how
yeah,
do I get myself back on track artistically to, like, I don't like how I look in the mirror today. How do I,
mm,
like, get on stage?
mm, yeah,
All of those things
yeah,
from mind, body, soul. you know, the dumb politics of trying to like get people to like you as an artist, all of that stuff. Like, if you don't have people that you can vent honestly and who will be straightforward with you, like this is an impossible road.
Mm.
Um, because there just aren't enough perks to make it worth it. Like you
To make
have
it
to be
work,
in it for
yeah.
the community. And the other thing is like a lot of people I know who are artists in some capacity can probably relate, but there is like an insane uh like ego and drive and self-belief that defies logic, that almost like is like a spiritual calling, I think.
Mm.
Like if you don't believe in yourself, like Berlin, my dog is like ta- my dog has tackled me in the like I think a lot of people that like I know that are artists have had this thing since they were a kid that were like that was like I'm not sure what I'm doing but I want to get on stage.
Mm.
I want to like I've got it.
Yeah.
Put me on the mic. And some of it is a desire for attention and some of it is just like a sort of like Midsummer Night's Dream puck
Yeah.
playfulness and daring. And there's like nothing in the world actually can extinguish it for better
Mm.
and for worse. Um, and I feel that when I'm in like sold out theaters, and I also feel it when I'm in a bar playing to two people. I have this like competitive, feisty, creative spark that goes like, I'm
Mm.
about to do something. I'm about to do something no one's ever done before, right?
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
you there, it's like an intangible thing and a need to express yourself and a need to try something new and a need to like get on stage one more time. Like, uh, you can't really teach it and you can't, and once you have it, it's
Mm.
kind of a burden because you can't put it out.
You can't put it out then. Yeah.
Yeah. Like there are plenty of other jobs I could be doing if I wanted to have a better quality of life. But then there's this thing that's like,
Mm.
you need to get on stage and sing a song. Like you need to write a poem. You need to like shut the world out and do something, create something that came to you in a dream.
What do you've talked a couple of times about goals, and that obviously with
Hmm.
without giving anything away, but kind of big picture in your life. What does what does a successful life look like
Hmm.
for you? Like where you are right now?
I would like successful life to me means having the time and the resources to like do the things that make life worth living, which to
Mm.
me are spending time with family and friends where I don't have to look at the clock or worry that my basic needs aren't met.
Yeah.
Spend time in nature, have a good meal out from time to time.
Yeah.
Um, Not suffer, just not like a reduction in suffering.
And
I think that's
suffering.
what we're all trying to go for.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to have to worry about medical bills. I don't want to have
Yeah.
to worry about groceries. I'd like to be able to buy the nice blueberries and not be stressed about it, you know?
Yeah. No, I
Um,
get you. Yeah.
and so what gets me there? Like it's a certain amount of financial stability. It's a certain amount of like living in a healthy community where like we're not being harassed by the cops all day long. We're not
Yeah.
getting evicted every other day.
Yeah.
There's like a shared sense of wellness that I think is the baseline for a good life. Like I need to live in a neighborhood where like I can say hi to my neighbors and know that like on a basic level we're all okay.
Yeah. No, I
Um,
agree.
and then like in terms of like creative goals, like I want to create art that brings people together and is memorable and is useful in some way and is fun. Like for me, like the highest type of achievement that you can have as an artist is somebody like my hero is Marvin Gaye,
Mm.
who had songs like, What's Going On, that
Yeah.
really spoke to a particular moment in time and
Yeah.
activated people who were on the ground doing the work of the revolution,
Yeah.
right? Like art sort of can change the world. The most important way I think it does is not like in itself creating change, but it's in giving fuel to the people who are
Mm.
feeding the hungry, protesting on the steps of Congress, like all of those little things that create social change need a little bit of a cheerleader, and that's what I think great art should do.
That's
Um, and it should also be something that people can, like, dance to, like, all of those Motown artists created art that people, like, wanted to play at parties and
yeah.
also wanted to sing at a protest. Like, it's that fusion of love, like, creating songs that speak to, like, love of yourself, love of your community, love of a lover, love of a friend,
Mm.
love of your country, whatever, like, it should do all of that.
You must have been looking inside my mind to see where I was going, because I was got and it's brilliant that you've got there, because I was gonna to go back to what I talked about in the intro about,
Mhm,
John's title, John's talk. Do you believe in the power of rock and roll? And it's almost like, what is that? How does that look? Is it still, is it still a thing? Can music still,
mhm,
and how can music, or even generally the arts, because I think, there's certainly a power in poetry, there's certainly a power in dance, there's certainly a power
yeah,
in art, sculpture, or whatever. So anything kind of creative, and it's always interesting, isn't it, that the it's the cultural side of things that's attacked by the
yes,
establishment. It's almost like this
mhm.
kind of fear that, those sort of like poor artists, they have so much power actually.
Yeah, it's actually it's very funny and it's very revealing. I had a little rant on Instagram the other day about how a few months back I made some comments on stage saying, we will see a free Palestine in our lifetimes, and
Mm,
the question is just whether we as Americans want to be a part of that free future or we want to continue to be the obstacle, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um, and I heard from the venue heard from some donors that they were maybe going to pull funding. I am not a person of means. I'm not a particularly famous person. I wouldn't even like the power that I feel day to day that I have is like small to medium, but to have wealthy individuals sort of vaguely threatening
wow,
an arts institution over comments I make reveals that people really do listen to artists. Um,
that's a good point.
and I had a mentor when I was at Stanford named Jeff Chang, and he's a great hip hop writer and scholar. And he had this talk that he gave like about the wave, which is that like, as a Hawaiian, he thinks about a wave differently than maybe
Mm,
others do, which is that like what most of us see is like that is the curly part, the white part at the
yeah,
top
the
when it
very top,
crashes into
yeah,
the shore.
yeah,
What Hawaiians understand is that it's a movement that starts miles offshore. And culture is that rumbling.
mm,
Political change is the white crest that hits that you see in your
yeah,
face. But like for every, name any significant legislation that's happened or societal change, it was preceded by a cultural shift,
yeah,
often years, decades earlier, where, you may not win hearts and minds for gay marriage simply by getting it passed in the Supreme Court. But
yeah,
there were TV shows, there were songs, there were albums, there were books, there were plays, shifts were happening for years and years and years that made it
mm,
broadly acceptable for people to understand that gay people are just people,
yeah,
marriage is, a human right, right? Like all of the it
absolutely.
was so many little micro cultural shifts that led to this big legislative moment. And that's, I think, what we're going to see when it comes to the revolution that takes down capitalism.
Mm,
Little by little, it's through TV, through books, all, through cultural experiences that another way of living is possible.
yeah,
It's not going to be like suddenly we have the barricades, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
there's
yeah,
protests here and there, there's people unionizing, um, there's albums being written. Like all of these little cultural moments lead up to the big
I
political
agree.
shift.
Yeah, I'd agree with you in that,
Hmm.
in the way that that's the way that change, if it's going to happen, is going to happen.
Hmm.
With those small small things that people are doing, that
Yeah,
may, this kind of like thing that people think, well, whatever I do doesn't matter, but it
right.
does. Every little bit does, because it adds up. It's cumulative, isn't it? It,
Yes.
it kind of adds up.
Well, like if you think about even like, I mean, this is just another tangent, but I'm fascinated by where the feminist movement is at. Like
Mm,
the Me Too movement, started with a few individuals who were speaking up about specific instances of workplace violence that they endured,
yeah,
right? That became a huge cultural moment. There were movies and books like created and shared about this, like people saw like, and then you see, female rappers like Megan Thee Stallion, like City
yeah,
Girls, talking
yeah,
about this is what I go through as a woman in this industry. This is how I'm thriving as a woman. This is how I'm fighting back as a woman. And now we're seeing movements across the world where like birth rates are going down because
yeah,
women have gotten this idea that we don't have to accept just whatever treatment for
yeah.
the sake of keeping
Agreed.
society running. And so it's like cultural moments have led to a change in population, in birth rates, in politics. Like these are huge political shifts that were precipitated by cultural cultural changes. Yeah.
I think also as well that it's kind of thinking about the other change as well, and the um breaking away from the way that things have always been done,
Hmm.
and thinking about, okay, well, why have they been done that way? And when you put the lens on why things have been done that way,
Yeah.
of that it's basically kind of rules that have been created by kind of like a sort of white male society,
Yeah.
and kind of not society, but even elite, that
Yes.
have kind of created this.
Right.
It's
It's
like,
not even broadly. I feel like the way that we live now is dictated by like six specific dudes. It's not even
absolutely,
just like men, it's like
absolutely,
elite white Christian men
yeah.
whose names and addresses we know.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
I mean, the numbers might change, but the demographic of those
exactly.
people has been with us for centuries.
Hmm.
And so, why should something that's been created by somebody or a group of people that have absolutely nothing in common with me, nothing
Right.
in common with you, be accepted as a socially acceptable way of doing things? I mean, it's
Yeah.
what I think when you start to think of things in that way, it it's kind of revolutionary.
It's radical. And I think like, one of the cleverest things that wealthy white men have done is to like confuse this is what serves my interests with this is what's natural,
Mm,
and the inevitability of um, oligarchy, sort of.
yeah,
And we
yeah,
see it down to like, well, yeah, people are just naturally selfish, and um, we have to just let the markets do what they do. That's not natural at all. There's nothing natural
absolutely,
about that. That is a
absolutely,
very specific and intentional way of structuring a society, all the way down to you have these genitalia, and that means you naturally are inclined to help other people
yeah,
and deny your own needs. That's a
yeah,
very specific and intentional economic choice that we've made as a society, that like
absolutely,
having a uterus means that you should be in service.
yeah,
And it's very useful to a few particular people, but there's nothing natural about it. But like this like confusion between like this is what we want versus like, well, this is just how it should be.
yeah,
Um, hopefully is something that we're starting to chip away at as
yeah,
a culture. Like there's and like all you need is more information. And all you
mm,
need is like enough people willing to say, well, I don't feel that that's natural. Here's what feels
yeah,
natural to me.
yeah.
To like really start to like tip the apple cart. I
Which
think
is
it's
when
exciting.
you get sort of think about the media and the role that the media
Hmm.
plays in the sort of information that it
Yes,
disseminates, and or doesn't disseminate, I should probably probably say. you know,
exactly. Yeah.
that then you think, okay, well, what exactly are we not being told? And it's
Right.
clear that they are complicit in
Hmm.
in sort of what's happening. But,
100%.
but
Yeah, luckily I think that what's true and what pushes us forward always comes from the grassroots. And then it becomes cool, and then the mainstream has to adopt some of it.
has
And
got to
then,
adopt.
rinse, repeat, we keep pushing forward.
Absolutely.
When I see like change shifts to the left in like mainstream media, I always assume it's because the people have finally pushed them enough, not that like, oh, like CNN finally decided they care about this social issue,
Absolutely.
you know?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah, they suddenly grew some ethics from
You
somewhere.
can't trust the big guys.
Lizzie, thanks so much. It's been a brilliant chat with you. I've really
Such a I could talk all day. Thank you so much for having me
I
on the
know.
pod.
I know. I'm kinda I wish we could carry on talking. I'm thinking of Berlin, who's been
Sorry.
amazing. He's been
Well,
amazing.
we can do a sequel next time I release
We
something.
should do, for
I
sure.
really
That would
appreciate
be
you having me.
amazing.
This was a cool talk.